record as well. There we go. Gonna post announcements. Post this. And post the live stream. There we go. Hello, hello. Let me also make sure I have it open to make sure everything's going okay. Oh, look at us, the sprinkles. Hello. Hello, Jack. It's good people are all in the chat. Let's see. I'm gonna make sure I open my stream. Oh no, I can hear myself. There we go. Hello, everyone. Hello, Grand. People are slowly trickling into the stream.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear us all fine? Is audio going okay?
Can you hear me? Am I understandable? Ugh.
Hello. Oh, just had a question about pineapple. Yes, Jack the Fox Author is asking, have you unlocked the jet properly? Yeah, kinda. It's kinda weird because my sleep was like weird, like the day I got back. And then it just kinda snapped back into my normal kinda sleeping schedule, which is aligned with the US one, so I wake up in the evening and go to sleep in the early actually what's it called before afternoon? What's the time period between morning and afternoon?
Between morning and afternoon?
Yeah. We have a word in it in Czech that sort of translates as until noon?
Until noon.
Until noon. It's like...
I don't know if I know a word. Maybe there's some colloquialisms around
maybe.
the US, but I think that I've always just called it either morning or afternoon.
But that's the thing, it's time that's before the noon, so it cannot be afternoon. But also it's too late for it to be morning. It's 10, 11 a.m. And I wouldn't say 10, 11 a.m. Morning that's 7 a.m. Maybe 8.
I don't know.
You need word for that.
We need a lot of words for
You
a lot of
need
things.
Oh. Oh my god. Anyway, hello everyone. So we got a bunch of people kind of in the chat, so we should be able to formally start. So hello everyone. Welcome to the Resonance. We're back after 2-week hiatus. The previous one, I kind of skipped it because we went to visit Snoqualmie Falls in Washington, where it was really pretty. And the other one, I was at FC at Further Confusion, so I wasn't available. But now I'm back home, and we're gonna be doing these a lot more. So hello everyone. For those of you who don't know, this is sort of a combination of my office hours, so you can ask any questions about Resonite, whatever, whether it's a technical one, whether it's about the platform, about its past, about its future, its philosophy, or even just generally the team, and whatever thing you would like to know, we'll try to answer to the best of our ability. Some questions we might punt over, just give generic answer and kind of punt it over to different office hours. For example, if it's anything to do specifically with moderation, they host office hours before this one. And some of you, you're probably coming from there as well. So we might, suggest to kind of ask those, in the different ones, but we'll try to answer, what we can. I also have Froox, and I have Syra here with me.
Hello.
He's part of our engineering team, and in order to if you want to ask any questions, make sure to put a question mark in the chat in your question. That way it kind of pops on our thingy here, and we make sure we don't miss it. Some of the questions we also might. It's sort of a mix, it's the question and answers, but also we might go a little bit in depth and explain, some of the further kind of philosophy, plans, goals, of Resonite and how the different features will shape its future, and how they're gonna be constructed. So some of them might end up like turning into these like more longer kind of explanations, rambles, and deep dives. We've got about visually around this for about 2 hours, so there's like plenty of time for lots of questions, lots of like in-depth explanations. With that, I think it should be kind of everything, so we should be ready to get started. We already got a bunch of questions popping up, so we should probably just get into those right away. So let me scroll up, because there's a bunch. There's the one from Jack Fox there. Have you unlocked the jet properly? Yes, I'm kind of just back to my US sleeping schedule, which kind of works for me. Check the Fox is saying noon. I guess, well, isn't noon like the 12 p.m.? That's like the exact point. So we have like noon, then we have afternoon, which happens after the noon, but there's a period between morning and the noon that's like we have a word for it in Czech that if you were to translate it literally, it's almost something like until noon or before noon. It's kind of like one of those things like where I kind of missed having a good equivalent for that kind of has the same meaning. Anyway, the next question is from Dusty Sprinkles. I have two-parter from Yoshkos, it's long. What is the future design scope of the protoflux execution context? If more contexts get added to protoflux, namely proposed state machine context, will they be extensions of the execution context or will they be separate? So execution context, like there are sort of like different ways to use protoflux, because protoflux, what it is at the core, it is a node-based programming language. And nodes, they can, represent anything. Right now, there's only like one context you can really use, which is the execution context. And that essentially, what it does, it makes, it executes operations, as it kind of goes. And it can, do stuff like, read values from the world, modify values in the world, trigger various like actions to happen, and so on. And it's kind of like the primary context. There's going to be a lot more context in the future, and they have ways to interact with each other. Whether they're going to be extensions of the execution context or not, that's going to depend on a specific context, because they can be used for lots of different things. For example, one of the contexts that's going to come at some point in the future is shader context. Once we switch away from Unity, we will be able to use protoflux to make shaders. And that, instead of just executing directly on the CPU, it'll actually be compiled into a shader that then gets uploaded to the GPU, so it's going to operate a bit differently. It's also not going to be extension of the execution context, because it cannot be, because you cannot really do the same kind of operations you do to the world and to the scene on the GPU. It is a very kind of constrained type of context. So that one is not going to be an extension. However, the state machine context is actually going to interact with the execution context, because what that one will do, it'll provide a way, like where you have like a node that represents your state, and you can flow the state from one node to another, and that node can actually trigger things to happen in the execution context. So for example, if you have like, node that represents this state that, your system is in, you can be getting like impulses that say, when the state, is first transitioned into, when it's transitioned out of, and then like, maybe every update you get like, an impulse saying like, this state is currently active, do whatever update thing. And then you also have like, values. You can like read out, is this context currently active? You can drive things, or use it as part of equations. So there's going to be contexts that do interact with execution context. There's going to be contexts which do not. There's a bunch more as well. There's even more, even right now, because the context you're typically using is the Froox engine execution context. And it's actually an extension of a more basic execution context. Because protoflux is developed as sort of a separate library, so it can technically be used outside of Resonite, outside of Froox engine. And there's a bunch of things like, core math operations, they have no dependence on Froox engine. They don't care about it. So that's just basic execution context. But then there's a bunch of nodes, say something like that duplicates slots, that requires the Froox engine context, because they operate within the Froox engine and with specifics of the Froox engine. So they use a context that's an extension of the execution context. There's a lot more into that, and we could maybe sometimes also get deeper into this, but overall, there's gonna be a bunch of them. There's in some of the previous episodes we talked about future of protoflags, and I covered stuff like the DSP context, which is gonna allow for processing of audio and textures and meshes instead of generating them. So I do recommend giving that video a watch if you're interested in more. It's on our YouTube, and I kind of go into details, with some drawings as well. And it's an example of another context that you'll be able to use. And it's another one that's not going to be an extension of the execution context, because say if you're doing real-time audio processing, you're not really interacting with the scene, and doing that would be kind of complicated because you have to keep synchronizing, and it would get really poor performance-wise. So that's running on its own thread that's on the audio thread, and it's its own separate context. There's gonna be a whole bunch, so keep tuned, and do give that video a watch if you're interested in more. The next question is also from Dusty Sprinkles, part 2 from Yosh. All the action nodes requiring Froox engine context, such as duplicating slow. I'll literally talk about that one. I haven't even read the question at the time. Are implicitly execution context, which would make using them outside execution context impossible. Yet having state machine pulls one of these action nodes and a state change would be a pretty useful ability. How would this be handled? That's pretty much what I covered earlier. It's the different contexts, they can actually interact with each other. It kind of gets even more complex because, say you have the DSP context, and that's, it changes how the node's gonna behave, that instead of, actions, it sort of builds a, sequence of, operations that happen to audio buffers. But some of the nodes, they might have, if you want to, if you want to literally run a for loop through, a buffer of audio samples, that DSP context node might actually trigger an execution context piece. It wouldn't be the Froox engine execution, it would be just the basic one, which means you can only do stuff, core math operations and some other stuff, but it would let you, whenever that audio buffer needs to be processed within the DSP context, the DSP context node triggers execution context to do whatever processing you want to the data, and then continues along the DSP context. So it's pretty much it's a very flexible mechanism, and we can, build whatever we need for these to interact. There's actually one more that I want to mention. One of the recent episodes I also talked about the terrain system, and the terrain system is going to introduce yet another context, a way to use protoflags to define how your terrain works. This has also been separated into another video that's available on our Resonite YouTube channel, so give that one a watch as well if you're interested in more details there. Next question is from Navy 3001. Will .NET 9 help with loading lag, aka spawning items? I believe it will help. I don't think it's gonna solve it completely. In general, any kind of update, it's not gonna solve 100% of the problems, but I do expect it's gonna have a significant improvement. The problem is, a lot of time, when you have lag, it's usually there's multiple sources for it. So what the .NET 9 will help with, there's two main ones. One is the actual code that needs to execute to decode the item, and process it and so on. .NET 9, it makes that code run faster, which means if any time that is being spent actually processing the item, decoding it and so on the Froox engine side, that's gonna happen faster, which means it's gonna actually gonna speed up that part of it. The other part is gonna help it significantly. One of the issues is because we're running within Unity has a really poor garbage collector, which means if we suddenly allocate a lot of memory, for example, to load the item, that can trigger the garbage collector to run full collections, which means it essentially pauses the process to run a collection, and it causes some of the stutter, some of the lagging. This is something that's generally called memory pressure. It's like when you're allocating memory, which pressure on the garbage collector, and because the garbage collector is very unperformant, that contributes to the stutters and it contributes to the lag. With .NET 9, all of the code will be running with way better garbage collector, which is going to help reduce additional source of stutters. Now, there's some other things that contribute to the lag. One of them is, for example, when we upload, when you load an item and, for example, it has meshes, those meshes need to be uploaded to the GPU memory. Right now, that is a synchronous operation. It has to be synchronized with the main Unity thread, which means it's essentially going to lag everything until it's finished uploading that. Which means if you have really complex meshes with lots of blend shapes, lots of geometry, that's going to cause bigger lag than smaller ones. We do have a system for textures where if you're loading lots of textures, it's actually the cost is amortized over time, which means it uses a mechanism called time slicing, where each frame we upload a small chunk of the texture, but if we take too long, we wait until the next frame, which means it's going to take several frames to fully load the texture, but you're not lagging as much. We'd like to implement something similar for meshes. It's a little bit tricky given how Unity works. I believe it's possible. It just requires some doing, but also it's a thing where .NET 9 is not going to help with that part of the lag, because that's something that's part. There's a limitation of the Unity and the graphics API, and it requires us to do more specific work to kind of get around that limitation and remove that part of the lag. So in short, I believe it's gonna help. I don't think it's gonna solve it in 100% of the cases, but there's also some other things we can do to improve that. As Alexevo subscriber Prime, hello, thank you very much for your subscription, Alexevo.
I think oh my gosh, sorry. I think what also will help specifically with loading items will be having our own binary format. Because right now we use Newtonsoft JSON, I believe, to serialize the items into BSON, which is a binary representation of JSON, and then we compress that using stuff like Brotli, or sometimes we use LZ4 if the world crashes or whatever. But having our own format that's tailored to work with our data model well, and isn't powered by Newtonsoft, because Newtonsoft JSON is a little bit memory efficient compared to system text JSON, but system text JSON can't do BSON, and so having our own sort of binary format will help speed that up a lot, I think.
Yeah. It will definitely help the loading process to become faster. I don't know if it necessarily help it because one of the issues with the Newtonsoft JSON is right now it hurts because of the poor garbage collector, because it also causes a lot of memory allocations. But with .NET 9, .NET 9 has much better garbage collector, which actually has better paired thread handling. So it can, for example, because one thing we already do is we load things on a background thread. So when the Newtonsoft JSON decoding is happening, that's actually happening outside of the main thread. So ideally, it shouldn't cause lag at all. One of the reasons it causes lag is because it causes a lot of memory pressure and that triggers the garbage collector. So what I think will happen is when we switch to .NET 9 is that we'll, because of the better garbage collector, that's not gonna contribute to the lag, because the garbage collector doesn't really need to pause the process, and it can also just pause individual threads and collect their memory. So I think that .NET 9 switch is gonna help significantly with that particular part. Possibly to the point where it's not contributing to the actual lag. It just makes it load.
Yeah.
It just makes it load in the background. But we definitely do want to switch to the custom format, because there's a bunch of issues with it, and also it's just going to make the loading itself way faster. So if you spawn an item, instead of having to wait, say 5 seconds for it to spawn, you just wait 1 second. So that's gonna be like one of the biggest benefits of the format. For the like itself, it would help having that format, while we're still with Unity, because we can, rework it like to reduce the memory pressure. But I think like the .NET 9 is gonna make it like so it doesn't really become an issue as much. But it's also like we'll see how it kind of behaves, and we don't want to switch to the format anyway. So it'll definitely help. Next question from Grandi K. Hello. Follow over from moderation office hours. What do you think about custom clients for Resonite, either including Froox engine itself or reverse engineer Froox engine in another language? So this one's kind of tricky because like I remember like you were asking during moderation hours, about is it okay to do this from moderation perspective and from legal perspective, and there might be some complications there, but what I would like to focus on is more like just the technical and philosophical perspective of custom third-party clients. It's the first thing is like defining what is a custom client, because you mentioned including Froox engine itself. If you use Froox engine itself, is that like a custom client, like because it's technically just using the same Froox engine as the rest. So I think in that case, it's not really something you'd call a third-party client. It's more just like a modded client. You kind of modify like bits of it. Reverse engineering is like that's another thing. That one can be tricky from legal perspective, but like if we don't consider that part, I think that's like significant undertaking, because you would pretty much have to re-implement Froox engine and have it behave like the same way the current one does, which that is a huge undertaking. It will take a long time to implement something like that, at least if you want to achieve like feature parity and have like full compatibility. Let me actually move over there because I do wanna showcase give you a little bit of like visualization for this. So if I go over here, and actually I forgot my brush. I knew I forgot something. So let me grab a brush.
There we go.
Brushes, geometry line brushes. Let me know how visible this one is, because we can have different lighting. Let me actually check. Can you see this fine? Is this okay? That looks okay. So, typical thing, like when people talk about like third-party clients, they generally think about, Second Life. Because Second Life is like, one of the platforms that is known for having third-party clients. And there's an important thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is, like how Froox engine works, how Resonite works compared to Second Life. With Second Life, you have, your servers, you have like the grid, that are running a lot of, complex logic. There's a lot of like, stuff here, there's like, complex things and so on. And this is like, the Second Life server. So, and this is like, running a lot of the complex logic, like stuff that is actually happening on the server. And then you have like, your relatively thin client, or viewer, which has like, few bits to like, get like data of the scene that's, happening and, display that to you, which makes it much easier to like, replace this, with a modified version, because there's like, this kind of separation between the server and between the viewer. With Resonite, however, it is like a different architecture. And it's kind of architecture where everything's within one. So like, you can have this be like server, but it's also a client. Pretty much like majority of the code runs on both and is the same. So we have like, a lot of kind of complexity here. We have like, all the engine stuff. We have like, audio systems, if protoflags, the scene system rendering, a lot of the complexity is in here. of what is actually happening. All the UI, all like pretty much everything that's happening in Resonite is all within the single thing, which means you cannot really, swap out the viewer as easily. And if you wanted to re-implement it, you would need to re-implement pretty much all of this. Versus with Second Life, you might just need to re-implement a bunch of these bits, and it's still compatible, with the server infrastructure that like just stays as it is. So I think for Resonite, it doesn't make as much sense, having these kinds of third-party clients. What you would have to do for it to be compatible, because in order for these clients to connect to each other, they rely on like all of these bits behaving, the same. So if you wanted to like, reverse engineer all of this and then implement another language, and be compatible with each other, you'd have to take the huge undertaking of like re-implementing, years and years and years worth of code, which I don't think is I don't think that's like, easily achievable, because it would take a long time, and and between then, we're also going to implement like a lot of other things. So to me, what makes more sense is, just taking these clients and maybe like, you have a modified version which adds extra bits here, or maybe like, modifies a few bits here. It's kind of, the way like mods are doing, and use that. So instead of like, that being like a third-party client, it's more like using a modified one. And I think that works like much better with like Resonite's, or specifically like, Froox Engine's architecture, compared to something like this. I think it pretty much kind of covers this thing. It's, it's just to kind of reiterate the point, it's essentially like, you don't have like sort of a separate client that's kind of like a thinner version, because like everything is kind of happening, and Resonite is based on everybody in the session potentially being able to execute any of the code. And you can have like, one of the client, you can have like the responsibilities delegated, you can have only particular client running certain updates and certain modifications, but everybody has the potential capability to do so. That's more of like, a software thing. So I don't think like reverse engineering like Froox Engine like is too feasible. It's gonna take like, it'll take a really long time, and doing it in a way that preserves the compatibility, because you have to make sure like, things kind of behave the same, is very difficult. If you were, because you probably want to stay, compatible with the other clients, otherwise, just kind of developing a different platform that's, similar, but you cannot connect, to others. You could potentially like, like, even just to give you an example, you could potentially, just implement a subset, but then a bunch of things will not be working. Say, for example, you implemented only mesh renders and static meshes. Now, anything using procedural meshes is not going to render. So, like, anybody, using avatar like that, that's just not going to work. Any of the tools are not going to work. If you don't implement protoflags, then, like, anything that's, like, driven, any materials, any behaviors, any avatars that use that doesn't work. Like, you kind of have to re-implement like most of it, like to really be compatible with other clients. So I think for Resonite in particular, I don't think we'll probably see like custom viewers. We'll more see like, modded versions of them. You did mention like in the moderation chat is like, having a like modifying the renderer, which is actually one of the things we're doing, is like, that we're gonna move the renderer into its separate process, and then like, this communicates with that. So like, whatever the render bits are, are gonna be here, and it's a separate process. So you could potentially, you could replace this bit, and have your own renderer, which is also like a relatively big undertaking, and also like, it only lets you do, limited things, because you cannot change how any of this behaves. And if you want to do it, say for performance reasons, that's not really going to help you unless you're GPU limited, because the majority of CPU time is being spent here. So if you replace this, that's not going to help, with any of these bits. And also fundamentally, I would say that still doesn't make it, custom third-party client. That just makes it a custom renderer. That's not like, too different from just, modifying some bits in here. Like if you considered this, to be one thing. But I feel like we're kind of getting a little bit philosophical with that one. But yeah, like you could replace, some bits like the render. It's something we already plan to do. We don't want to switch to a custom renderer, but also one thing you have to realize, the renderer is only responsible for the rendering. So replacing that, you can make maybe improvements in the other guard, change how it works, but isn't going to help with any of these bits. So I do hope that kind of makes things a little bit clearer and, answers your question. If you got any follow-ups, let me know, and we'll get to those after we get through a bunch of the other questions. So we're gonna return back.
Keep grabbing the camera.
There we go. Hello.
There we
go. Next question is from Navy 3001. When are Resonite shorts returning? I don't have any updates on this right now, I'm sorry. The next question is, Check the Fox author is asking, my question today is regarding the planned in-game workshop. How will it work? What kind of functionality do you want to be able through it? Oh, this one's a really good one. I feel workshop is one of those things where it's really gonna supercharge the community, because I feel right now it's one of those features where there's a lot of need for it in the community from the things we see people doing, because people in our community you make lots of really cool things. You make cool worlds, but you also make lots of cool items, avatars, gadgets to play with, or even tools for other people to use, and the way people share these right now is through shared folders. The big problem with shared folders is, one, is discoverability. You kind of have to know somebody, who has shared folders, so you can grab it from them and put it there. It's also discoverability, figuring out when new items get put in and so on. So to solve this, we want to introduce workshop. There's going to be a little bit similar, it's actually going to use similar mechanisms too, to submitting worlds, because you can already, publish worlds and share them with others, but it's going to generalize that so you can do that for any items. So say you build a gadget, that you want to play with, something something like this, and you want to, well, we don't have the targets, you want to build something like this and share it with others. You'll be able to submit this item specifically, not having to put in a world. You have to be able to submit it to the workshop. You tag it, you provide pictures and so on, and then it becomes available for people to search and spawn out of the workshop. You'll also be able to submit updates, so you can for example, when you do improvements, everybody gets whatever the latest version is. But the overall goal is have the workshop sort of be this kind of centralizes a repository of community creations, and something we'll build around. Actually, I'm contemplating I should go draw some more sketches. I'm gonna go draw more sketches.
I can grab the thing. Okay.
Let's go here. There we go. Did I forget my brush? No, it's here. There we go.
I'm the guy pushing the wheelie cart around with the TV on it.
Oh, what happened to the camera?
Oh, what the heck?
The camera got messed up.
Oh dear, I must have accidentally grabbed it. I apologize.
Oh, that's good. Just adjusted. Okay, there we go. I think that's good enough. Sorry, the camera got grabbed. There we go. So, with Workshop, you'll be able to, submit various items in there, and on your dash there's gonna be you're gonna have workshop buttons, so click it, and you have feed of items, so you have for example this cool thing, whatever this thing is. I don't know what I'm drawing, or maybe somebody submitted an avatar, and it's maybe it's I'm spending way too much on these doodles. So you have feed of different items that people make, and they're tags, so some of them can be avatars. Then you're gonna have categories. So you can, for example, be I want avatars. And by the way, this is not like actual necessarily how the UI is gonna look like. This is just more to, illustrate the principle. But you have like, stuff like avatars and have like tools, and gadgets, some of the popular tags, or maybe games. One of our users, Alexander, like actually just literally yesterday, he built a version of Cards Against Humanity in here, and he gave me the shared folder. So like, that's gonna make it easier distributing. You just, submit it there. You're gonna have, like a search bar, so you can like be like, I wanna search for this thing, maybe find this thing. You can browse the categories. So there's gonna be like, the typical like workshop like UI. Listen, like when you browse all the items, and then you can, spawn it out, or maybe you can equip the avatars and so on. But what I think is also gonna make the workshop really powerful is, like when you click on the items, there's gonna be like a description of it. You can provide pictures and other things. Eventually we'd like to have, other features built around it, like for example discussions. So like, when you have an item and you open it up, I suck at drawing. You open an item, say like you have the, avatar, and there's, some description of it, maybe there's a discussion, like, with people saying this is a cool avatar, like this is such a cool thing, and like this is super cute, and like, what people want to discuss. But the way we want to approach it is, whenever we add features like this, we want to generalize it. So they kind of like, they're almost like, modular pieces that kind of go together. So when we add discussions, so you can discuss items, we also make it like, possible to have discussions for other things. So say, for example, once we add, so you can actually see, the update history in here, you could maybe leave comments to the updates. Or maybe, when we add profiles, so you have like a profile, maybe people can leave comments, on your profile. Or maybe once we add events, like, events UI, you'll be able to add comments, to whatever events are being planned. So we want to make that like, functionality very generalized and kind of like, modularly build pieces of functionality together. The other part where I think workshop is going to be really important is once we have, people submitting avatars and they're properly tagged as avatars, it'll improve the initial user flow, because oftentimes when a user comes to Resonite, what they want to do, they want an avatar. So what we can do is during the initial setup, we'll be like, do you want an avatar? It's gonna just ask them, do you want an avatar? And then like, it shows them a feed of like, some of the popular avatars that are free to use, and they can just pick one right there without having to search. They just pick, it does everything for them. They now have like, avatar to start with and to walk around with, instead of having to like, find a world and find the avatar in there. So we can, literally take a piece of the workshop and put it into other people's, into other places, like the setup UI. Another example, say you have something, like the material tool. Right now, if you have a material tool and you want to change some materials, we have to find them. Like, for example, here's some materials. I can like grab this, so you can find materials, in the world if you want to change something and browse for some reason. You could, submit materials and tag them into the workshop, so you could search the workshop and say like you want like a wooden material, and you find one there, you spawn it in, you pop it in. But with our focus on making everything very modular and kind of like, interacting with each other, what we'll be able to do is we can actually integrate part of the workshop into the tool itself. So it's just going to be like, I want a material. You select, find material, and it pops out, little like UI that's technically the workshop, but it's filtered just for materials. So maybe there's like, wood, or maybe there's metal or glass, there's a bunch of categories, and there's like, showing just the materials. And you can just browse it, with your tool, and you'll be like, okay, this is the material I want. You click on it, it pops in there, and you can like, use it, and you can, apply it to things. Now the wall is grass. So being able, to use the workshop as a building block for other features is another of the things that I think will be really, really powerful, because, it's gonna allow us to simplify the workflows. And even, doing something like that, because technically you can, you could go to this interface, you could search, filter by materials, you can, find the material you want, spawn it out, plop it into the tool. You can still do that, but I think by having it integrated into the tool, it skips a bunch of steps. I think that can help tremendously, because like when you're building worlds, that's finding a material that's, something you do very often as you're working. So if we remove, say 5 steps from it, and it's a thing you do, 100 times per session, that's 500 steps, removed, 500 clicks you don't have to do anymore, and that can make like a huge difference to workflow. There's a bunch of other features as well that are going to integrate, with the workshop. One of the things we want to do is add a system for sort of like, tracking licenses. So you can say, this asset, has this license to use, and maybe this one requires, payment or proof of ownership because you have to purchase the asset. What it will do once we have that feature, it's, the workshop is going to become aware this item is, something that requires payment. So if you want to actually spawn that item and use it, you'll have to purchase it or prove that you own it. And at that point, the workshop UI will also serve as sort of like a shop. So you'll be able to sell items and worlds, and avatars through Resonite. The other part with the licensing system that I think is gonna make things also easier for new users is you might be able to prove ownership of certain assets by, for example, having a file. So say you purchased like an avatar and you have the FBX file for it. If you drag and drop, the FBX into Resonite, we can actually detect, okay, this file hash is associated with this paid asset, so that can grant you a license, and we can just be, instead of setting up this avatar, from the scratch, here's a list of already set up versions of it. Do you just want to spawn one of them? And I think that might help, a lot of the kind of initial onboarding, like when you don't find the avatar you want, but you drag one in, and the system is able to use that, to verify ownership. And of course, it also have to depend, is the author of the asset, okay with it kind of proof of ownership? But assuming that they're okay with it, we can just grant the user, you now have the permission to use this. You can spawn these already pre-set up versions without having to worry about setting it up from scratch. And it's going to be another thing, where the workshop, it's sort of this kind of central feature, and there's other features that interact with it. Because one of the things we really want to avoid is designing things when they're big monoliths, because we could make it, that the shop itself is integral part of the workshop. We could make it, licensing. The problem is, it makes these things into these big kind of monoliths, which makes them harder, to use, and it makes it hard to use that functionality outside. Because, say for example, for the licensing, the workshop, that can be one way to find paid assets. Something like people are selling. But say it's just, browsing a world, and say Cyrus, say Cyrus is playing with a thing, he has this cool color, and say this is a paid asset. And I will be I want this thing. And I don't want to this thing specifically. I'm just kind of using this as an example because I think this is a personal one. But say this is a paid asset, and I'm I would like this thing. I want it too. And you'll be I want to save it, and the system can be this is a paid asset. You could save it, but you have to pay the creator of it. So you could find items kind of organically outside of the workshop as well, and it's going to use the same licensing system. And that way, having the licensing system be technically a separate part, but one that integrates with the workshop, is a lot more powerful than having it integrated into it. So, there is one more system that is also going to be technically a separate thing, but that I think will integrate really well with the workshop, and that's Molecule. That's going to be our sort of version tracking system, and our primary goal is to use it for Resonite itself. Essentially, so we can push updates to it, track, changes, and so on. You could, switch different branches much more easily than through Steam. and have our own kind of, you know, system for just handling that. But the versioning functionality, you know, and tracking of like the changelog, you know, what's changed between these and these versions, that's useful for more than just Resonite. That's going to be useful for items as well. It's going to be another thing that's going to integrate. So like if you, for example, browse an item, maybe there's like a thing where you see like, you know, this is the current version, but you can see like, you know, a version history, you know, and you can see like changelog. So for example, you know, version 0.02, and it can be like added this thing, fixed this thing, and maybe we can spawn the other versions too. So there's going to be another thing that will integrate with the workshop, but technically it's also going to be a separate feature. The other part that workshop, or other example that I want to mention before like we move on is like, you know, I mentioned materials, you know, and there's like an avatars, gadgets, tools, so on, like, you know, whatever we want to share. But I think one that's also important to mention is protoflags. Because one of the things that's going to come to protoflags are going to be custom nodes. And custom nodes, they're going to, you know, let you bundle common functionality, you know, essentially into like nodes. So like if you have like, you know, you have like a complex thing that's, you know, a bunch of nodes. And I kind of talked about this like in a different video as well that's on YouTube. So I do recommend checking that one out if you want to know a little bit more about this. But so you have like a bunch of nodes, you combine that into a single node that you can then reuse in a bunch of different creations. You'll be able, you know, to take this custom node or maybe a whole library of them and submit it to the workshop. And similarly, how you could like, you know, find materials with the material tooltip, there could be one for the protoflags where you're like, I want a function, you know, that computes, you know, some complex math with a sphere and tangents or something. And you just, you know, search it and be like, okay, there's a function, and you just integrate it into your protoflags. And I think it's going to make sharing of code much easier, and it's going to make it much more powerful building stuff with protoflags, because instead of like, you know, having to find, you know, already pre-made things or just having to constantly build everything from scratch over and over, you'll just have access, you know, to a repository of like, you know, of like pre-made kind of code and libraries, and just easily, you know, integrate into your own projects. And it's also part where the molecule, the system, like, is gonna be very useful, because say like you integrate, you know, some set of nodes, like a library for something, you might want to tell the system to like whenever it's loaded, use the latest, you know, version of it, but only the minor version. That way, like, you know, if they make any fixes and improvements, your thing can automatically update, but, you know, any major versions you have to like update like manually, because usually if you use semantic versioning, major versions, you know, have breaking changes, whereas minor ones should not. So in short, workshop, I feel that's going to be like one of the really, really powerful features. And I think it's just going to empower, you know, the community and the creators and even regular users to do a lot more. Because for regular users, like, you know, if you're just a casual user, you want to hang out, you want to socialize, it's going to make finding avatars easier. It's going to make it easier, you know, to find gadgets and games to play with. If you're a creator, you know, the same repository can be used, you know, for materials, textures, sounds, you know, protoflags nodes, and you can find it easily. And we can even build integrations, you know, with our tools, and you'll be able to build integrations with your tools, because it's all going to be like, you know, data feed based, you know, to sort of supercharge them with having a repository to like, you know, all the community made content. So it's definitely one of these features I'm really looking forward to adding. Like, I keep, like, every time I see, like, you know, just people sharing, like, shared folders, and then having shared folders of shared folders, and having, you know, multiple nestings of these, I'm like, it feels like, you know, the community content, you know, it's, like, it's almost like bursting at its seams. Like, it really needs that workshop, so introducing that, I think we'll get, like, lots of cool content, and it's also going to make it much cooler, it's going to make it much cooler and easier to discover that, which helps both new users and existing users who build content. Actually, one more thing that I'm going to mention is, if you like, you know, if you have a creator that's like publishing things, one of the things that I would also like to integrate is like, you know, having sort of feeds. So if the creator pushes in like, you know, an update to an item, or they make a new item, and you're following that creator, it can pop in your feed and be like, this creator made this new item, you know, and like that's gonna help contribute to the discoverability. Anyway, I think I rambled like long enough about this one, so hopefully that kind of answers the questions, give you like better idea, you know, what we want to do with workshop and why is it such an exciting feature, and why I think it's definitely like after the performance update is done, it's like, you know, one of the things that's kind of at the top of my list where I think this is going to help the community. It's going to help the growth, you know, of the community and of the platform, and I would like to prioritize it like soon. DM. Anyway, thank you very much for the question. We're gonna move back to the other ones. Whoa. That's just the awkward silence as we move between locations.
Okay. Also, in terms of, so the next question we have is, with the in-game workshop, I want to say group projects very much needed. This is by the Red Echo, by the way, I forgot to mention them. Me and Chris need joint work on an item, and only allowing one user to have credit would be annoying. We do have groups though. Like you can request to have a group made, I think, if your Patreon tier is high enough.
Yeah.
And you can then have it gives you a set amount of shared like group storage space that you both can access, and when you publish worlds, or like let's say you published a public folder from the group, it will show as being owned by that group rather than any individual user.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. Like the groups mechanisms, it's like it's very useful for like, you know, the collaboration, so you can like, you know, just have a shared folder, and you know, you can have a shared credit. So I would definitely recommend like using that feature, and being able to publish things, you know, as a group, like that's definitely still gonna be part of it. I do think it might also be possible, like with the licensing system, we could just say you don't have to create a group, like, you know, we can just allow multiple credits for things, but we'll have to see about that one. But the groups one is always gonna be there, so this is definitely good. Grand UK is asking, are you aware of what buzz factor means when referring to a project? If not, as a measure of how many people could disappear before the project stops developing. So in that context, what is the buzz factor of Resonite in a technical sense, and what can be done to make it better? Yes, so it's actually something that we cannot talk about, like, you know, in the community. Not community, in the team. Well, sometimes in the community as well, but I misspoke. And it's, you know, something like we're continually like looking like, you know, to improve, and generally what it involves is, you know, making sure that we document, you know, our processes. We know, like, you know, how things are set up, what's our you know, cloud infrastructure like, you know, how are things kind of working together. So having documentation so other people can pick up things, you know, that kind of helps with kind of, you know, stuff. The other part is, you know, making sure people actually have access to the things. So like we're kind of, you know, making sure that people are set up, you know, for example, with Azure access. And then, like, you know, there's the part, like, you know, of the code. Pretty much like, you know, all the engineering team, they have access to the code. So like if something happened to like any one of them, technically any of the people can, you know, continue on. So it's something, you know, we do talk about, something we kind of, you know, take measures to like improve. It's a gradual thing because, you know, there's a lot of things. And sometimes if, you know, something happened to some people, that's gonna slow things down. But there are, you know, ways to recover from that. Next question is from Grande K. Are there any thoughts you have on open sourcing Resonite either in parts or fully? Oh, yes, actually. It's actually one of the things I would like to do in not like the immediate future, well, soonish, is start open sourcing pieces of Resonite. So if we think about, you know, open sourcing Resonite in full, that one's a lot more complicated because, you know, we use like code that's ported from you know, third-party code that we don't necessarily have a license to open source. We use code, you know, that's also used from other things that like we have license to include in the code, but not necessarily license to relicense it. There's, you know, stuff like where open sourcing certain parts might potentially, you know, open up, you know, some security kind of issues because there's like, you know, certain mechanisms, like, you know, say stuff with, you know, bot evasion. we specifically don't talk about how band evasion works, and part of it, like, is on the cloud infrastructure, where the code is not accessible to people. You cannot, decompile it from the client. And if people knew, or the more people knew how that works, that makes it easier for them to get around it. So, like, open sourcing that can cause harm. So there's a lot of kind of, things like that. There's also other part of it is, in order to open source it, that usually implies that people will be able to start submitting pull requests because they want to, submit improvements. We need to be able to handle those, both, like, having the bandwidth for it and having, some sort of structure in place where we are like, these are our coding practices. This is, what we accept. This is what we don't accept. Because we need to ensure that is, for our version of it, we want to maintain, certain quality of the code, and we want to maintain certain philosophy of the code. There's like things, like one of the strong principles for Resonite is we always make sure, when possible, everything stays synchronized. But there's like, you could just implement things in a way that doesn't follow that principle, but it's something we would be very unlikely to accept. But, that's something that needs to be defined. We need to say, this is how you need to write things. So it kind of adds, additional kind of overhead and complexity that we need to do, to open source things. And even in general, like, we might have, like, well, we do have, overall goal where we want to take Resonite, and we want to, head, like, in certain direction. There's also might be things where, people might fix bugs, and things in a way that's not the highest quality, or that could cause, other issues and other problems, so we might not, accept those. So there's a lot of kind of like, complexities with like open sourcing the whole thing that I don't think we are ready to handle. Like, it requires a lot more work and potentially more manpower than we have right now to do that. Unless, we just went like, we open source it and we're like, we're not accepting anything, we just, just do whatever, but I don't think that would be a good way to do it. So in order to kind of tackle this, I want us to do the open sourcing more gradually. Actually, there's one more thing. If we open source the thing fully, one consideration or concern that we have is, are we gonna be able to continue doing it as a company? Could somebody like, Meta just come in, take the code, and just kind of push us out and, destroy us, like, with the, like, infinite resources? That's something we don't want to happen. We want to keep working on this. We want to make this our livelihood. And as a thing, we need to balance with the benefits we would get from open sourcing. So there's another kind of like thing, like, where it's a bit of an unknown. And there's like, stuff like licenses that will help prevent that, or at least minimize the risk. But also, we have to weigh those against other things, so it becomes a more kind of complicated issue. So on the flip side, doing it by pieces, I think, is much more kind of digestible, much more easier, on our bandwidth right now, while still getting a lot of the kind of benefits of that. So what I would want us to do is essentially take various subsystems, and make those open source. One of them is being, for example, the import and export system. Because I think the one's going to be like, the one's a really good candidate to open source relatively early, because it doesn't really, like, it doesn't modify the data model, like, it doesn't, like, add any types of components and things. It's just a system where, you take whatever external formats you have, and it translates them into the data model, or takes, like, stuff that's in the data model and translates it out. If we design it right, we can, make sure that it's easy to write importer and exporter modules. We can also take the existing, importer and exporter functionality and just, essentially just open source it. So people can use it both as a reference or to make their own forks, with modifications, to help, better support the content like you're making. And like, it's something we don't have to like worry super much, about long-term issues, because say if you're making a component, something that becomes part of a data model. Now there's a worry, because that component can be saved into the cloud. Now we have to worry, will that component keep working the same way it's working, 5 years down the line? Is this maintainable? Is this gonna cause issues? And that adds a lot of overhead to those things. With an importer and exporter, we don't have to worry about that, because it's not adding any new components, it's just translating stuff. So at the moment you import something, it translates it into, the Resonite data model, and the Resonite data model, we already know what's in there that we can support it. So the translation is essentially just like, one-time process. Additionally, it helps, with some of the security stuff, because say we open source stuff, it might make it much easier to make, like, rippers for content, where you can, like, steal people's, avatars and things like that, because now we have, access to all of the code. If we only open source, the importer and exporter, and there's, like, specific APIs that we interact with, we can make it, so it's not possible to invoke an exporter on something you don't own. So you cannot, just use it to, like, rip data out, and it kind of helps things, make things a little bit more contained. The other parts that I think we might open source is, stuff like the shaders. Those will be mostly for reference. One thing actually that I've been kind of considering, though, is also open sourcing the new procedural animation system, because it's one of those things, like, where I'm not really happy with it. Like, it's been kind of, like, rushed, and it needs a lot more work, but also, like, I want to spend time on some, like, bigger features. So one of the thought I was having is, if we made this open source, we was just like, here's the code, we could start, like, accepting improvements, let the community help us, kind of polish it up some more, and improve, the platform. I don't know if that's the way we'll do. Like, actually, there's a question, to you, like, would you be willing to help us, improve things like that, so we can kind of focus on other things? Is that something you would want to do? Like, if you like this idea, let us know, because that definitely will help, like, influence the decision about that. The other part is also, like, I think is going to be great open source, is, like, the device drivers. So, like, if you want to support for more devices, like, more face tracking, more, haptics hardware, we can take, existing drivers we have, we open source them, again, as a reference, or so you can, see, like, this is how these things are implemented to make your own. Or maybe you want to make a fork, like, you don't like how certain part of it works, you want to modify it, run your own fork instead, share it with the community, you'll be able to do that as well. So, that's going to be another great one. It's also, like, one of those that doesn't need to add new things to the data model. So I do think, like, we're gonna be, maybe this year, hopefully this year, we'll start, like, open sourcing pieces of Resonite, because we do have a great community, and people, who want to help make this platform better, and I feel that's gonna, provide, it's gonna provide a way to kind of contribute more in that regard, and also, even if you don't want to, help contribute, like, to the main platform, it's going to give you ability to better, customize some of the aspects of the platform. Say, like, you want to import, like, some super obscure format, or, one that we would not really prioritize. Now you have, like, easy framework to work with to add that support for that format, into Resonite. We, by open sourcing that part, we kind of give you more power, in there. And over time, like, we kind of do more and more bits of, like, Resonite, and maybe eventually we do the whole thing, but that is, like I mentioned earlier, that is much bigger task with a lot more kind of considerations. But yeah, like, it's definitely something we'd like to do. It's gonna happen in pieces, hopefully this year. So, keep tuned, and hopefully soon-ish DM. Next question is, Modern Brown is asking, will component search be properly implemented anytime soon out of curiosity? Well, It's one of those things. It depends what you mean anytime soon.
Okay.
If you mean like, because that could mean in a week, in which case the answer is pretty much no. It could be in a month, in which case it's probably still no. It could be within the next 6 months, which the answer is maybe. The component search, like the component UI, we're actually gonna scrap the current one, and it's gonna be re-implemented with the data feeds. Data feeds, as part of their kind of system, how they kind of work under the hood, they natively support search. So once the UI gets re-implemented, it'll come with search. This is also going to include protoflex nodes, which are technically like components in the system as well. It's just kind of specific subset. But yeah, like, depends what you mean anytime soon. We generally don't give time estimates on things because things change. Right now the focus is still like, finishing the performance UI, performance update. The UI update, is one of the things that's high on the list. But on certain specific timelines, I cannot give you a number right now. Moonbase is asking, how does Second Life have third-party clients then? Are they just modified versions of the original client? I think it was asked like during the explanation bit, so I think we already answered that one during that part. I do believe they like use like modified versions, like they modify the clients, some like replace more or less. There's some open source implementations. I'm not like super well versed, but yeah. Next question is from Jack the Fox Author. So I'm just checking time. We still got about an hour left. I remembered another question I've had. How will protoflex collection support look like? As in, what kind of new nodes will be added? How will we be able to interact with collection types? And what existing functionality nodes will get rework expanded for use with collections? Also, thank you, Niken, for the Niken 132 for the subscription with Prime. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's probably kind of late because we're kind of just chewing through the questions. Yeah. So I hope you're still like in there, or thank you. Is a good one. Jack the Fox Author is asking, I remember another wait, I already read that. So yeah, as far as the nodes go, the nodes will generally not be modified. Like the nodes that are in there are kind of gonna stay the way they are. There might be some new overloads. But in terms of the specific support, we want to make it as generic as possible. So you're, for example, going to have nodes which let you, access an element out of a collection by its index or maybe by its key. And that, that collection can be, different types. It can be an array, it can be a list, So there's going to be, probably some equivalent of like for each iteration, where you iterate over all the elements. So you essentially you just give it a collection and just iterate over all of them. So you're gonna have like a lot of kind of very common operations. Same thing, when you want to add an element to a collection or remove or replace. There's gonna be a bunch of nodes for that. And once you extract an element out of a collection, then you can say it's a list of numbers. Then you just use like addition nodes, for working with a number or whatever you already do, say with an integer or a string or something, you just do that like, once you've extracted it from the collection. So most of it is probably gonna be, ways to iterate over collections, access the elements in collections, and build and modify the collections, like mutate them. There's also gonna be a number of nodes which will then accept collections or produce collections. So, for example, there's going to be a node which accepts string and, gives you like a dictionary collection that's JSON parsed. And there's going to be a reverse which accepts like a dictionary or other data types and produces a JSON string. So it's like, easy to convert from one to the other. You could technically build those on your own as well, if you want to do like JSON parsing, which some people already do, but for some of the common ones, we're going to provide, with primitives. Same thing, say, once you get component access, you just get, a collection of, components, on a particle slot. You can iterate over it, access specific element, do whatever you want. Another good example is like, the raycast nodes. Because right now you have raycast 1, and I've specifically added the raycast to be raycast 1, so it doesn't need collections. It literally just gives you the first hit, which in some cases, like, in a lot of cases it's sufficient, and it's actually faster too, because with Beppo physics, how we have it integrated, it's that search is more efficient because it knows it doesn't need to build a collection, it doesn't need to sort them, it just literally finds whichever is the closest one that satisfies the criteria. So using that one, if you don't need, multiple hits, is more efficient. But we will add a raycast all node, where if you do a raycast, it gives you a collection of all the hits, and you can, iterate over them, you can sort them, do whatever you want with the results. You essentially get a list, and then, use the generic nodes for working with that list. This also applies for, collections that are part of the data model, like, for example, the brushes. The way the brushes work, literally, when when you're drawing a brush stroke, the brush is just adding new elements to an array, or a list, or whatever we call it, and it's updating the procedural mesh. You'll be able to access all the data, with protoflags, so you can just iterate over it, do whatever modifications, you can add your own. So you could, build, procedural things. You could, just do whatever we want to do, with a collection of data, you'll be able to do at that point. The other part is, we can add nodes, for example, for accessing mesh data or texture data, so you can iterate over the pixels or iterate over the triangles, build out meshes. Same with audio, audio is this collection of, audio samples. So you can iterate over that, generate stuff procedurally. It's gonna open up a lot of kind of cool options. Granik is asking, can you send me that public folder for Cards Against Humanity? It's fine to be shared. Yeah, I think it's okay to be shared. I'll have to check with Zenur. He's the one who made it, but he was kind of giving it out. Next question is Rasmus 0211. Any plans for being able to display rules upfront prior to users joining a world? I'm under impression many users, especially new users, don't read prior to joining a world. Yes, there's been a feature kind of in works in the background for that. I don't know when it's gonna come, but it's probably something that's gonna pop in at some time. Next question is from Konager. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right. Not trying to make you self-conscious, love what you're doing, but you're also saying you know a lot. It's okay to have a breather every once in a while, don't need to be nervous. Oh, I'm not really nervous, I just gonna talk like this. Glitchfur is asking, Nikon 132, yes. I guess Glitch is surprised to see Nikon in there. Also, Glitch is cute. It's probably screaming right now. Next question, Navy 3001. Will Resonite have something like prefabs? Would be nice to update one asset and updates them all in project. Yes, we do have a GitHub issue for it. It's a functionality that's going to appear at some point. There's actually also something that's, going to integrate into the workshop, which we talked about earlier. So yes, this will be a feature that will come. It's also a little bit tricky one because, sometimes it depends how and when do you want things to update. Because you have a, how do I put it? You essentially say you build a world and you use somebody else's prefab, and they update that prefab, that might break, what you build with it. So we'll need a system that's gonna, determine when do you want your world to update and whatnot, and that can be either just fully manual process. So you say, I'm using this prefab, I want to update all the instances in this world right now, or we can have it semi-automated, and it's where the system like Molecule comes in, where whoever's making the prefab, they can version it, and they can only do minor updates, and you're gonna say, if it's just a minor update, just update it automatically. If it's a major version update, then that requires, manual update. So being able to define the rules for the prefabs, when they update, I think is going to be important, particularly with social kind of collaborative platform like this. The other part of it is we need to have a good way to define overrides, because with Resonite, you don't really have a difference between you don't have a difference between like, an editor and player mode. And usually like in editors, like if you're editing, it kind of tracks the changes, and then like if you make some changes, like, say you have a prefab, and for the specific instance you change your color, it tracks that. But the tracking has an overhead. So the prefab system will need to have like an efficient way of kind of handling this and determining what is an override, from the prefab instance, and what is just regular behavior that should be like, erased. So there's gonna be probably some systems to deal with that. Next question is from Dusty Sprinkles. I'm not sure if this is a more of a different hours questions, but when do you think age verification could come? I think it'd be useful for the workshop as well as worlds. So generally we don't answer when questions. It's something like we've been kind of looking into in the background. There's kind of a number of like kind of complexities with that, because like when you want to like, if you go with that kind of solution, is, how is it like implemented? What company do we use? Do they have like, good data data privacy? We like, as the Yellow Dogman Studios, we're a European company, and generally there's much stronger focus, on privacy and protecting people's private and identifying data. So that's something we need to be kind of very careful with. The other part is, how would the community work with it? Which companies, would be okay with us using? So it's something that will probably show up in some form at some point. There's not anything too specific right now. So we'll keep you informed, like once we're kind of like, thinking more seriously, like, and looking into specific kind of companies for this kind of thing. We might, open up a discussion and be like, this is the companies we looked at, like which ones would be comfortable with, like which options would it be comfortable with, and, have that kind of like discussion about this feature. The next question is from the Red Neko. The issue right now is the groups is on the $20 tier, which is quite expensive for me, so having the other free or cheaper method for credit and multiple people would be great. And you can always like, just put like credit on the item itself. With the licensing system, we'll probably just have it like, so you can say like these are the creators of this. Because one of the powers of the license system is, even if you're not selling anything, you can just say, like say this item. I actually forget which exact license we're using. I think we're using some kind of Creative Commons ones, which means like, this is free, you don't need to pay for this item. But, there still can be restrictions, how can it be used, and you also want to track who worked on this item, because there's, multiple people that contributed to this. So having the license system, you'll be able to like, place information, be like, these are all the people that worked on this item. This is, it's licensed, with Creative Commons, this and this version. So that system, I think, will provide, that functionality. For now, I would just recommend, put one thing that people do is just put like a slot which says like, credits, and put credits that way, or maybe integrate credits into the item itself. The next questions, Dusty Sprinkles, I kind of meant more like what it would be like, but EP question marks the correction shows up. Unfortunately, I don't know. Do you know which question they're talking about? I kind of lost context.
Yeah, I wouldn't know either.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, if you're posting a correction, please include like context of the actual original questions, because it might be there might be a bunch of questions before we get to yours, and by the time we've forgotten what you've originally asked. Next question is from Modern Balloony. So about the IK, do you have any ideas about what the new IK systems would be? Yes, I mean, we're going to build a custom one. It's going to be an in-house system. We got lots of kind of ideas how it's going to work. There already is a discussion on it on our GitHub, so I do recommend checking that out, because it has like, a bunch of details. So yeah, I don't know like if I should like get like too much into depth on this one, because we're going to be working on it right now, but there's a few parts, like, one of them is making sure it works well with lots of different avatars, so it's easy to set up. So it also like works really well, with multiple trackers. That doesn't do like, the neck scrunching, doesn't do weird things with the spine. So there's kind of lots of things with that. also make it easy, to kind of adjust it and reassign bonds and stuff like that. Next question, so just checking time. Navy 3001. Random question. If you move component of assets into disabled slots, will those assets load? Like if mesh is on it, will the mesh load? So right now, well, it kind of depends which components you move. If you move just the asset provider, then it'll load as long as there's something referencing it. So generally, yes, the assets will still be loaded. It kind of depends a little bit, because like there's some things where they actually no, they will, even when disabled, they'll like load. There's a feature though, or specific optimization that's planned called the cascading asset dependency. What it'll do is actually make it like when you say you have a mesh render, and the mesh render is using a bunch of textures and is using a mesh. If you disable it, it means it doesn't need to be rendered. It can tell those textures and the meshes, and the other assets, I don't need you right now. I'm not being rendered, I'm disabled. Which means if there's nothing else using them, they can actually unload from memory. Or if it just, if it starts that way, maybe they don't even load in the first place. So that will change the behavior, but right now disabling it doesn't prevent it from being loaded. And next question is from Dusty Sprinkles. Do you think in the far-flung future there'll ever be some kind of way to pack components per Froox into a custom component? I think something like that would be useful, but I don't know if it fits any specific long-term plans. Yes, there's actually a GitHub issue for it already. It's called static protoflux assets. What it will allow to do is, you can take, a bunch of dynamic, nodes that you have with protoflux, and you compile them into a static asset, and it will then get loaded. So that's something, that's already on the roadmap. It's probably going to happen at some point. It's also going to be useful, like I mentioned earlier with the workshop, where you can, you can essentially publish libraries, of nodes, and share them with people. There might be more efficient way to share them rather than having the whole nodes with all their positions and everything. Next question is from Kayobier. For war building, a way to commit certain changes similar how Git works, would it be nice but probably not feasible? Yeah, that one's a little bit trickier because you need to be able to do a diff for the world, which might be possible. We could, one way to do it, we could add a system where whatever changes you're making, it just, serializes it into a text representation, and then we just do a diff on that, and then you can use external tools, but it's not going to be as well integrated with the rest, Resonite. It will also require that textual representation to be stable, so it doesn't just detect that the whole thing changed, it only takes some individual changes, which I think should be feasible if it copies the hierarchy. So I think it's potentially feasible. You could also have it more integrated into the system, but there's also a question, do we want to have it well integrated where, how are you viewing the diff? Are you looking at it, in terms of, looking at the text? Because if you're looking at the text representation, that might be really tedious because, there might be thousands of things that changed, and it's hard to visualize, what the changes are, because it's all just a textual representation. What might be more useful is having, sort of in-game visualization of the changes. So say, we remove this thing, or we move it, there's something that shows that change, and can just quickly flip between the two and compare them and maybe accept individual changes. But this is a lot more work, because now we have to build some way to detect those changes and build tooling to visualize that those changes happened. So that is feasible. It's just a matter of how we want it implemented and how much time we want to invest into it. So checking, we still got 35 minutes left, so we're good on time. Modern Baloney is asking, Is there a way to override the size of haptic volumes per avatar? I got a Giggle Plug recently. I had to make Flux to resize the haptic volume radius because it actually couldn't grow big enough for me. Wait, so you're asking for haptic volume? Do you mean the haptic triggers or the haptic samplers? Because you can change size of both, but depending which one you want, it's a little bit, it's gonna be a different process. If you're using the Giggle Pack, that one actually should be in settings. Let me actually check mine. There should be a bunch. If I go manage Giggle Packs, there's, you've got like a haptic point radius, and you've got a bunch of positioning options, so you can change it, that way. If you want the haptic, triggers on the avatar, that's it's a little bit tricky because you need to like modify it for each person, because generally it's gonna be sized to their avatar. You can put custom ones on the avatar. So for example, if I wanted my snoot to trigger things, I could put a haptic trigger in there. So that's one way to kind of customize them. There should be components to like disable the default ones too, if you want to build, just a fully custom one as well. But overall, like, you should be able to modify them. If you're using, like a bHaptics vest, there's actually components that specify how they're mapped. The only thing is you need to have the vest on, so it actually creates the objects. Then you create, enable the visualization, and you can mess with the values and see, like, make sure, it matches your avatar. So hopefully it kind of answers it. Like, if you have more questions, let me know. And it kind of clears the questions we have for now. I'm still got a bunch of time left, so now what?
I guess.
Oh, more questions. We're saved. We're saved from awkward silence. Modern Brown is asking, yeah, but like I can't really move them individually. Should I make feature requests for that? I'm not really sure. I understand. Like, you should be able to move them individually, because it's just one for the Giggle Pack. So I'm kind of confused what you mean. But yeah, you can always make like an official request. You can look at it, like include like some details there, because I'm a little bit uncertain if I'm understanding you correctly right now. Back to the awkward silence.
I guess we just...
You got any more questions in there?
Hello?
Hello? It's more questions.
I say meow.
Meow.
Even though I'm not a cat.
What's your favorite? Meow is definitely good. Cats are good. You can also do...
That's Frooxing noises.
Just those kind of general. That also answers the next questions. What does Froox say?
Froox makes Frooxing noises.
I make Frooxing noises. I make lots of noises. Oh my god, now I'm getting all the silly questions. Aegis Wolf is asking, what is? This is. Can I hit that one? I missed. I failed. Next question is, for Modern Baloney, is potato a construct of the mind? One moment. Mm-hmm. 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 Where is it? Seriously, this is where inventory search would be useful. Aha. Oh, this is the bleeding one. We've got a bleeding potato. There's actually a funny story about this one, because I was making a pulsating potato for some reason, and then Gearbell, she shot it with a gun as I was saving it, so it got saved with a gunshot. So just make it... Oh.
What happened to it?
I deleted it, but it was supposed to explode. Or maybe this is the exploding one. Maybe this is the exploding one, let's see. Yes, this is the exploding one. I hope that answers your questions, Mother Melanie. Also, thank you, Recommender Rock, for the Prime subscription. Thank you. Wee. Next question is from the Red Neko. Reposting because I was gone when he responded last time. I'm on BIOS, so I wait to wait hours. Sorry, the issue is that... Oh, I recommend, like, you know, just rewinding the stream or, like, you know, watching the recording. Like, usually put it, like, you know, the after. Next question is from Dusty Sprinkles. Froox, how does it feel to look at the Gaussian splat in VR? It's kind of cool. Like, it's, like... It does have like this kind of like weird, like if you got a good splat, like it looks real, which is really weird. Like I don't know how to describe it. You'll be able to see soon enough because I do have the Gaussian splat like rendering working and it works in VR. And since the last demo, I also fixed, you know, some issues. We also, Sire actually has been working. They've been making the port. The C# port of the library for like a file format for them, the SPZ, which makes them like way smaller for storage.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to use them. I didn't want to push it because it touches the cloud, and I was like at FC and then traveling, and I was like, I don't want to, in case something blows up, I don't want to be making changes to that right now. But I'll probably release it, you know, sometime next week, at least the initial version of it, so you'll be able to like look at splats, you know, yourself. The only thing is they're pretty heavy. There's gonna be some things that are gonna reduce heaviness, like in memory compression, but generally they kind of heavy. You might want to, like, you know, use them in a simpler worlds, and you might need a beefy GPU to render them. The Red Neko, no, we're going to mobile, unfortunately. You can, you know, just wait for the YouTube, like, you know, to appear tomorrow. Rasmus 0211, any plans to replace the Cloud Home? New users often have a very hard time loading it. We don't really have any plans like to replace it. Generally we can, there's been like some optimizations to it, and we can always do more optimizations. There's optimizations, you know, to the engine. If there's like issues with like loading it, it would actually help us to know what those issues are. You know, is it like the assets are taking a long time to load, which might also be weird because, like, you know, we pre-cache it, so that'd be actually weird. Like, is it like, you know, or is it like too heavy, or like, what exactly do you mean, you know, by the users having a hard time loading it? Because of course, you know, we get like feedback like this, but it's very vague. It actually makes it very difficult for us to do something about it because it's not enough for us to, you know, understand the problem that people are having. If we understand the problem, then we can better, you know, engineering solutions for it. You know, and figure out like what's the best approach. But like, you know, we're not gonna replace something, you know, just because, you know, like, if we like were to replace something without even understanding what's the problem in the first place, you know, how would we also make sure we don't introduce the same problem with a replacement? That's not really, you know, a good approach. So generally, we'll, you know, generally, like, you'll have to, like, give us more detail, essentially. Like, you know, what kind of issues are people running into? Let us understand the problem, and let us, you know, figure out how to fix it. The next is Serenacom which, how did I just go about that? Okay, so that's also like all the questions right now. We could actually, I forgot, but like we are running on the previous build, so we could give a bit of a showcase of some of the new things, because one of the things that this is, one of the things that, you know, that this is running is we have a new system for ambient light. Specifically, like, you know, whenever you're in a world, there's like multiple things that contribute to the lighting of, you know, of things. So you have, like, you know, the direct light, you know, that's like, if I actually switch this to a smooth POV, you know, you've got the direct light that's coming, you know, from the sun over there, but there's also like ambient light, because I don't think there's like any light sources in this direction, and it's actually taken from the skybox. So would you actually be able to, can you kill the main light? Like the direction light, so it's just the ambient light, so we can kind of see what that looks like.
Yeah, let me grab the sunlight here and just turn it off. Alright.
There we go. Just turn off the sunlight. So what you see on the sphere, make sure, this is now illuminated purely, at least it should be, I don't think there's any light sources, purely by the skybox.
There's this one right here.
There's this one. Is it doing anything?
Oh
yeah, I see it. Just turn off all the lights.
Mm-hmm. Trying to find where the heck the light is. Whoops.
I found it. I think it's like contributing super much anyways. Actually a bit.
Hanging light, that one or that one. Okay, there we go.
There we go. Oh yeah, it's darker. So now this should be illuminated purely by the skybox. And actually, what Unit is using for this is something called spherical harmonics. It's like a mathematical construct that allows you to encode low frequency information, that's directional. So like in every direction that the surface is facing, it can, sample a color and get like, this very smoothed out, color information. And before, this was, completely handled by Unity. We essentially were just, letting Unity do its own thing. We're just telling it like, please recompute this now. Now, there are a few problems with that. One of them is like, you don't have direct control over it. If you want it to be like, a bit brighter or darker than the skybox, or maybe you don't want it to match the skybox at all, you are not able to do that. Unless you are doing some, shenanigans with fake skyboxes. The other problem is, the other problem is like it's very CPU heavy. Because what Unity does, it just computes the texture, transfers to the CPU and computes it, which means it would cause like a lot of stutters and freezes and drops in frame rate. So we had to throttle how often it actually recomputes it. And because of that, if the lighting was changing in the world, it would be very jagged. Where's the tool? I think I left it somewhere here. Oh, there it is. Oop. So I grabbed the tool, which means like if you made it dark, like, it would be still light for a little bit and then, change after it. But here, if I change the skybox, it's pretty much changing instantly and I make it dark. And it's really dark.
It's super duper dark blue on the top.
Yeah.
It's definitely not how that's supposed to look.
Do I need like some tweaking? There's like higher frequency like informations. It's probably getting it also like from the bottom as well. But pretty much like what the principle for this is, it's now using a compute shader to compute the spherical harmonics, which is way faster, which means you can pretty much run every single frame. So if I actually open up, if I open up the inspector and I find under more assets, I think it's on the skybox.
Oh my god, you are so blue.
I'm blue. On the skybox materials, where's the skybox? Oh, there we go, skybox component is the one I want. There's new components like ambient light SH2, and there's like, the spherical harmonics. So what I can do is like, if I change the lighting in the world, you can see those values change. And the colors, they kind of roughly match, but they're kind of like, they represent like coefficients, so they're going to be a little bit like weird. It's all dark.
Interesting that like when you make it full day, like it gets really, really dark blue.
Yeah. It's kind of picking up from something, but the way it's doing it is actually rendering, the reflection probe, and then this component, reflection probe ambient SH2, is, calculating from that. And one of the things you can actually do is there's the spherical harmonics is using second order, which means there's the flat, just single color, and then there's second orders which have higher frequency information, and you can actually tune these. You can make this brighter and lower the lower frequency components, and kind of adjust how it kind of looks. For my experimenting, this kind of tuning the parameters a bit brings it closer to Unity, because Unity for its own calculation seems to boost the lower frequency and more kind of smooth out the higher frequency information, because the high frequency tends to add very strong darks or brights. So you can mess with it, but you can also now you have kind of freedom to adjust these to whatever fits your world. If you want to be really bright, well, it's really bright. Actually, see, if I boost the high frequency bits, you see those are contributing to really dark tones. So I might do this, but also this is just a value, so you can use this with protoflux. You can compute your own. You can do whatever you want with it, or you can pre-compute a bunch and then lerp between them. So if you're in an open world and you go into a cave, you can lerp it to make the ambience darker. So now we have a lot more kind of control how this works. The ambient light SH2, it's literally just being driven from this. So I can actually just break the drive, and then I can put whatever I want here. So if I let me reset the value first. Reset the default, and now there's no ambient light at all, and everything is absolutely dark. Actually, this makes it easy to see the other light sources. You can see there's a light here, because now the only source of light is whatever the light sources are, and there's no ambient light. It's pure darkness. But I can maybe put this here. If I put 3, and now everything's red. Or if I put red into the higher band, you see now it's a red from the top. So the top is red, but bottom is gonna be darker. And we can do green from the side. So now it's almost there's a green light that's coming from this side. And usually wouldn't put extreme values like this, but I'm just kind of doing these as a demonstration. You can do very funky ton of things with the lighting. And you pretty much have just full control over how this works. I can show you some higher bands too. As you go higher and higher, you see this one kind of has 2 kind of waves that kind of happen on it. Never around Syro. It's kind of very harsh lighting, but it's good for visualization. Wow. So I can just put this back here. I can drive it, and now it's being computed from the skybox again. But any existing worlds or any new ones that you create, they're going to have this kind of setup where the ambient light SH2, this is actually what determines what the ambient light is in the world. Ooh, what was that?
I was touching it.
Oh, okay. So it determines, what this is. And then this component is computed from a reflection probe. It also adds a bigger reflection probe that just kind of covers everything, and it provides skybox, it only renders skybox, so all your ambient lighting is from that, but you can make more reflection probes, compute this, save it into a field, and then make a bit of protoflux that interpolates between the two. We do have a bit of time, so I can actually show you how to kind of do that. So if I grab protoflux, let's make I'm just gonna add 2 spherical harmonics. Yep. So the data type is spherical harmonics, and this one's basically second order, so it's L2, and the data type of the coefficients is color X. So I add a value field, There we go. I'm just gonna duplicate it. So say like this is, you know, one lighting I like. I'm just gonna grab this value. Actually, no, that's not a value. I'm gonna grab this value and I'll drop it here. Blip. And say I want to change the lighting. I want to be like this, so it's kind of, you know, reddish. And I grab this value and drop it here. Oh, I grabbed the wrong thing. Grab this, drop it here. So I have these two values stored. And I can just, you know, source them. So if source for one, source for the other one. And then I can just use, you can kind of think of these like, you know, if you work with vectors or matrices, it's a little bit similar. You can interpolate them. Forget this interpolation value lerp. And I'm actually going to type the value. I'm just going to let it overload. So from to lerp. So it's just going to interpolate. And now for this one, I'll just break the drive. I don't care about it. And I'm gonna drive it from protoflags. I know it's dark. You know, and now I can actually control it. And you see, now it kind of like interpolates between the two of them. And if I do 0.5, there's like, you know, one that's in between. So now if I plug, you know, say I do time, and I do like a sine wave. Sine wave, sine, the trigonometry, sine, and I just want to remap it too, so it's remap. There we go. So I have a value that goes, you know, from 0 to 1. I can plug it here, and now, you know, my ambient lighting is, you know, interpolating between the two. And with this, you can pretty much, you know, this is just a simple example. You can do whatever logic you want, you know, save, you know, your spherical harmonics values and do whatever interpolation and then drive, you know, this with pretty much whatever you want. You have like, you know, now much kind of better control. The other thing you could do is you can also multiply these values. So say like, I want this to be brighter. You can use the, let's see, multiplication value. It's just small. I'm gonna let it overload. So I'll take this, like the result. Oh wait, I cannot. It doesn't like this. I'm just going to. No, wait. Oh, wait. Do we not have multiplication for this one? Oh, I might need to add these. There might be some operators still missing. There's one too. If I go math, spherical harmonics, there's like one specifically. There's scale orders, so I can go color X and just scale the values. There we go. I go scale orders. I can process this one. Do this. And this one's one, and I can just, you know, make it brighter if I want. And you can do, you know, again, whatever kind of processing you want on these. Or say, like, you actually want it to be darker compared to Skybox, so it was like, you know, 0.5, and now the ambience is darker. So hopefully this kind of, you know, gives you, like, a bit of an idea, you know, how these kind of work and how you'll be able to, like, utilize them, how you'll be able to, like, utilize them for controlling the ambient light in the scene. So I'm gonna move this, I might just leave this here. It's gonna be changing the lighting, but the thing's fine. It looks a little bit funky. Some triggers a bit funky. There we go. Oop. Why is my t-shirt? I'm just gonna do this. There we go. We actually got a few more questions as well, so Let's have a look. The Red Neko is asking, we also have 10 minutes left, so we might not be able to get through all the questions depending how many there is. So we'll be able to see how many we can get through. The Red Neko is asking, actual question though, any plans to get the Linux build working again once switch to source, as its GPU performs about 50% of Windows to Proton? I tested multiple worlds. The worst example is Grid Space, where Windows get 120 FPS at 60% usage, where Linux under Proton is mere 80 to 90 FPS and maxing out my GPU. We don't really have any specific plans. That's something we'll have to evaluate, at a later point. It might make it easier to support because, the engine is being based on one that should have multi-platform support, but we'll still have to see are there any kind of complications with that, what other things we have to deal with. There might be, other libraries, other things to consider, so I cannot make any promises right now. I think with the performance, it might depend on your setup, because I kind of hear conflicting things. Some people are actually, sorry, you're using Linux as well, and you...
Yeah, so the performance under Proton can definitely vary depending on your setup. I'm currently using a build of Proton that has better emulation, or not emulation, it's not an emulator, don't quote me on that. It has a better implementation of or a better re-implementation, I should say, of Windows synchronization primitives under the hood. So that is how it synchronizes resources, and so that's called NT sync. So it's like a special branch of Proton that has this NT sync thing in it, and it makes it run pretty good. The performance difference between Windows at this point when I'm using this is pretty negligible, but you can still get pretty good performance even on just stock Proton. And some people say it's faster, some people say it's slower. It really depends on what game you play, what hardware you have. So if you notice a difference, definitely don't consider that the be-all end-all result of oh, I guess Proton is just bad, because it really could just be an unfortunately poor combination of hardware or whatever. I don't even know. So
yeah, I mean, we do have a Linux channel in the Discord, so you might poke there. I know some of our active Linux users they give people advice or share their experiences, so they may have some pointers how to improve performance as well. So it might be worth trying. Next question is Osan Game Club. Wonder if there's a bug in shaders, sphere calculated concave versus convex that would mirror inverted reflection concave. Try cube shape? I don't really know what you mean.
Yeah, I don't understand that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't really relate to the things. I'm sorry. DJ Prodigy Hunters, can you apply spherical harmonics to shading independent objects like avatars? No, you cannot apply it to individual objects. So unfortunately not. The lighting is kind of global, so it applies to everything in the world. Erasmus 0211, not exactly Resonite, but seen anyone running around with Resonite t-shirts? Yes, a bunch. I actually saw some people post on Blue Sky recently, which is kind of neat. We've also we've seen a bunch of the BLFC, because there was a lot of people. It's kind of sort of the de facto Resonite con, and there was a lot of Resonite t-shirt people. We also had some people at FC. I had my Resonite shirt, but I didn't actually wear that one, but some other people did. This is why it's kind of cool to see them in the wild. And next question is DJ Prodigy Hunters, can we get purple flags now that displays the value of the USA National Depth Clock? I think we don't have data types large enough for that.
Boy.
I mean, there's WebSocket interface. You can just plug things from external APIs if you want to, assuming there's one for this. That also covers all the questions again. We've got 6 minutes left, so we actually might be able to squeeze a few more questions. I thought it was like a few more, but if you've got
I have a question.
You have a question.
I have a question.
What is the question?
So I don't anticipate this, but
An answer.
given that you can calculate the spherical harmonics from reflection probes, does that then open the door to potentially basic support for GI probes based on those spherical harmonics?
I mean, you could. Oh, thank you, Nagisa Phantom, for the subscription. Thank you. I mean, technically, yeah. It's like what the light probes gonna do is essentially like, instead of just a single global one, you have like a bunch of them kind of scattered in the world, and then when you're rendering things, it like it essentially samples that. It finds like the closest ones and uses like a tetrahedral like interpolation to like compute a value between those probes. So technically we could support that. We might not, because like that adds a complexity to moving to source, because that is a thing that needs to be re-implemented. And I've had a before I actually implemented this, like every conversation with Kings as well, just making sure like it doesn't kind of cause complications there. And that might cause complications, so like it's one of those things we might not want to do it, because it's gonna delay source a lot more. It's a similar thing with shaders. Like if we wanted to, we could add support for custom shaders right now. Problem is, all of the shaders you would make would break when we switch to source, which means your content would break. And that's one of our philosophies, is like we try to avoid, tooth and nail. Like we will try to avoid breaking content as much as possible. And because of that, even though on the technical side it's easy to add right now, we could just let you build custom shaders with Unity, there's not a path to maintaining long-term compatibility, and because of that we don't do that feature. And this is kind of like similar. This one we could implement with source. Like I don't see like anything blocking it, like other than time. But sometimes you have to kind of weigh it. It's like, is it really worth it having it now? Is it worth it like now? And then like delaying the thing that's gonna provide even more benefits later. So probably not, I would say. On technical level, yes. On project planning, no.
Gotcha.
Next question is from Alex Tucker Anton. How many things do you have to re-implement from Unity to get rid out of Unity from the game? Thank you. So there's actually a longer talk on our YouTube channel. I recommend checking that one out because it goes into detail, but there's pretty much two things that are like features. One of them is the particle system. Photon dust is our new custom particle system that pretty much does that. That one's about to be finished, so we're gonna remove the old Unity one. We're gonna only have like photon dust very soon. And the remaining thing after that is the audio system, which there is also another video on our YouTube channel about that. So once the audio system is done, then it's pretty much, like something I started jokingly called the splittening. We're gonna be, pulling Froox engine out of Unity. We'll still be using Unity, for rendering at that point, but we'll get like the big performance improvement by using .NET 9 runtime, which has much better code gen. At that point, we only have to replace the renderer, to get completely rid of Unity, which is going to be one of the next steps, like after that, at some point after that. And then we'll pretty much be completely rid of it. But right now, Photon Dust is almost done. Audio system is going to be working next, and then the actual work on like the Unity communication and then splitting out into process is going to be pretty much the next thing. So next question is from Rasmus. Thoughts on Resonite operating systems? Will Resonite move more towards Linux as SteamOS? Some people have been code running Resonite on a Steam Deck. Probably not in the near future, because like Windows is still, as unfortunate as it is, it's still majority of both people around to run VR. So until that changes, I don't see us moving. it's kind of, you know, thing is like, you know, like if there's a lot of people using certain thing, then it's worthwhile for us, you know, to invest time into it. But if like, you know, if there's not much pressure, like, you know, like we might not be able to dedicate time to it. Anyway, with that, we pretty much have like 40 seconds left, so should be able to like wrapping it up. So thank you everyone for like, you know, joining the stream. Thank you for asking all the questions. I hope like, you know, you enjoyed like, you know, the answers, you enjoyed learning more about Resonite, learning about what the future is, learning, you know, how we work. Thank you as well, you know, for making really cool content, you know, whatever we make like in the community, what like, or if you just like, you know, hang out and socialize, we appreciate it too, because that helps, you know, it helps the community kind of keep going and keep this platform going. And thank you everyone, you know, who supports us, you know, now on Patreon or Stripe or through whatever other means. It helps, you know, make sure like we can keep doing this. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Sairo, you know, for being here helping me answer some of the things. And we'll see you with the next one next week. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. I have to check if there's anybody to raid.
Oh.
Are you... Let me see. I see Crater Jam. There's Blue Jay. Oh, they're actually in the Crater Jam. I'll raid them. Blue Jay, JB. Everyone get ready. It's kind of funny because there's like literally two next to each other. It's like Crater Jam and Blue Jay, and they're both like showing the same thing. So I'm gonna do a raid. Blue Jay. I like to support, you know, like streamers. Blue Jay. Blue Jay JB. Let me make sure I got that right. Yes. So you're gonna raid. The raid has been created. It's getting ready. So everyone say hello to Blue Jay from us. And we're raiding now. Whee! Oh my god. They'll get like go from one viewer to a bunch.